I'm Kenny and welcome to Theme Class. So we're back with a brand new theme. And what will we learn about today? Well, fairy tales. Can you say, I can learn about fairy tales? One more time. I can learn about fairy tales. Now, if you remember, I told you that I absolutely love to read. And fairy tales are one of my favorite things because they're so excited and filled with magic and exciting stories that teach us things. So, what exactly is a fairy tale? Well, I'm sure you've heard lots of fairy tales, things like Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, but there are certain things that make a story a fairy tale. First, there are certain things that we see, not always, but often in fairy tales. For example, there are characters that are good and some characters that are bad, characters that are poor and characters that are rich, sometimes royalty, people like princesses or kings, or odd characters, things like witches, trolls, giants, small men, talking animals. Those ones are always fun. And then where the story happens is often in nature, someplace like forest or the woods, maybe a meadow, or a long time ago. Also in or near a castle. There are some other things we often see in fairy tales, like the number 3 or the number 7. That one's a little tricky to figure out. So when we read our fairy tale today, let's see if you can find either of those numbers in our story. Often there is magic in the story. Think about Cinderella when the pumpkin turned into a carriage. Also, there are often special words like once upon a time or happily ever after. There's often a problem. We can also call this the conflict. So usually there's a problem that the good character has to figure out or solve. And usually the problem is between good and bad. And then there's a solution or a way the problem is fixed. Usually the good character wins or is rescued at the end of the story. And usually the bad character disappears. So when you see these kinds of things in a story, especially if you see a lot of them, your story might just be a fairy tale. There are lots of different kinds of fairy tales, and I'm so excited to read some fairy tales with you. Also, to see if we can find these different elements. All right, are you ready to hear our first story? Well, the story I'm going to read for you is called Mercury and the Woodcutter. It's also sometimes called the Honest Woodcutter. Let's start. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a woodcutter who was cutting down a tree on the edge of the water. Suddenly, his axe flew off of the tree and into the water. He stood there sad when suddenly Mercury appeared. He asked the man the reason for his grief, and on learning what had happened, out of pity for distress, he dived into the water and returned with a gleaming golden axe. He asked him if it was the one he had lost. The woodcutter replied that it was not, and Mercury dived back into the water. This time, Mercury appeared with a shining golden. This time, Mercury appeared with a shining silver axe. He asked, "Is this your axe?" And again, the woodcutter replied, "No, it is not." Mercury went one more time into the water. This time, Mercury appeared with the man's axe. So excited, the man thanked Mercury. Mercury gave him not only his axe, but the golden and silver axe as well. The man was so excited that he went back and told his companions all about what had happened. The next day, one of his companions, determined to try his luck and greedy for fortune, went to the edge of the water and began to cut down a tree and pretended to throw his axe into the water. This time, when Mercury arrived and asked him, "Is this your axe?" using a golden axe, the man said, "Yes, that is my axe." That's mine, and reached his hand out, trying to get the prize. Mercury was so disgusted at his dishonesty that he not only declined to give him the golden axe, but also refused to get his axe back from the water. Honesty is the best policy. Okay, let's review our story. And I want to look at some different story elements and see if we can figure them out. The first story element is the title. The title is the name of the book or the name of the story. Do you remember what the title of our story was? Well, it was Mercury and the Woodcutter, but we could also call it The Honest Woodcutter. Very nice. Now, how about the setting? The setting is where or when a story takes place. Where did our story take place? Here, in the woods, by the water. This is the setting of our story. Let's continue. Next is the characters. The characters are the people or the animals that are in the story. Well, we had a few characters. We had the honest woodcutter. We had Mercury. And we also had the companion or the dishonest woodcutter. These were the characters in our story. Now, the next things that come up are the conflict and the resolution. We also can call this the problem and the solution. So, the conflict is the problem that the character has in the story. In our story, the honest woodcutter had the problem that he threw his axe into the water. Now, the resolution is how the story was solved. In our story, Mercury asked the man if the golden axe and the silver axe were his. And then when the man told the truth, he gave him back his axe. So those were our conflicts and our resolution. Now, these 5 elements can be found in every story, whether it's a fairy tale or not. But one thing we want to think about in a fairy tale is something called the moral. The moral is the lesson that the story is trying to teach us. So what was our story trying to teach us? Let's think about it. The honest woodcutter dropped his axe into the water. Mercury tried to help by bringing him different axes. He brought him a great gold axe and also a shining silver axe. These axes cost more money and were better than this woodcutter's real axe. But instead of lying, he told the truth and said, "These are not mine." When he told the truth, he got back not just his axe, but also the 2 other axes. He told the truth. Now, when the dishonest woodcutter went to the water and dropped his axe inside, Mercury again asked him, "Is this your axe?" But he did not tell the truth. He said, yes, it's mine, even though it wasn't. So Mercury became angry and didn't give him the axe, but also he didn't get back his real axe. So we learn honesty is the best policy, or it's always better to tell the truth. You never know what you're gonna get. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to my story with me. I can't wait to read another story next time. See you!